end time every day, easily.
TV.
Good morning. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. We do these updates regularly with just information you need to know about the upcoming hurricane season or the existing hurricane season. But today, and like we did last week, we're doing updates to bring you up to speed on what's actually happening in the Gulf of Mexico right now and what's about to happen in the Gulf of Mexico. We want to thank our sponsors who make these possible for us. That's USAA, been a sponsor for a long time, and we appreciate all they do. The South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the host for the National Tropical Weather Conference since the beginning, and we appreciate them. We look forward to being back there again in 2021. The city beaches are open, so there's a place to go, just socially distanced if you go there. They ask that you do that. And Plylocks, the folks that make these wonderful hurricane clips, we appreciate that as well. So all you got to do is sit back, watch, and learn today. So let's turn it over to Mr. Bill Reed. Good morning, Bill.
Morning, Tim, Brian, and Alex, and everybody online. As the case was Friday, we're kind of winging this. It's a last minute put together, so I get the latest data on there. So I'm going to present a few things, and Brian will chime in with stuff that he's seeing that maybe I'm missing, and then we'll have any kind of discussion that we have afterwards. So I'm going to try right now to get the presentation up. And it says I'm presenting to everyone. Is it working, Tim?
Yes, sir. See your picture beautifully.
Excellent. Okay, here's the latest satellite loop of it's the water vapor, mid-level water vapor off the GOES 16.
I'm not seeing
a couple of key.
Hang on a second.
I'm
not seeing yours, Bill.
Why not?
There we go. We got it.
Okay. I'll start over. Here we are with the morning satellite loop. Some of the key features that are on there is obviously there's a heavily sheared tropical storm Marco. The center is actually down here off the mouth of the Mississippi. And there's dragging the convection off to the east. I'll show a radar here in a bit that'll show the presentation better. Improving Laura, the center is out over water here, moving across the very warm waters just south of Cuba. There's been a little bit of dry air overnight that was being entrained in it, plus the terrain there, so it's a little lopsided still. Thinking is it'll get better together once it gets out in the Gulf. The outflow is extremely good looking on it, and conditions are favorable. Here's the big subtropical high that we've been talking about that'll play a role in the future course of mainly Laura as it's forecast to build into the Gulf of Mexico, and where that building stops and where this trough feature anchors to set up a channel of south to north flow that'll capture the storm. That'll be the critical decision that we'll be facing over the next couple of days as the storm crosses the Gulf, approaches the northern Gulf Coast. I also want to point out there's still quite a bit of dry air present from the earlier trough that was down in there. Hasn't moistened up totally, but that does seem to be improving on the satellite. Close up here of Laura. And to me, it looks like in the short time I've been looking at this visible that it is getting more convection and better organized around where the core of the storm is just south of Cuba, moving rapidly off to the west, and it won't hit much land except for this last peninsula in Mexico. And if it's moving fast, I don't think it's going to disrupt it much. Okay. As promised, here's a radar out of Mobile. And there's quite a bit of rain, and actually wouldn't be too surprised if we get some brief spin-up tornadoes in these cells that show some sign of rotation in this rain band coming on shore from Pensacola down to Panama City. But the center's out here beyond the convection. And they'll have some weather from this today, but compared to Laura, it's not going to be a significant event. Other radar, and Brian, why don't you explain what you're seeing and how you put it together, since this is your product?
Sure, Bill. Yeah, so this is a giant mosaic, basically, of all the radars that they have in Cuba. So I don't produce the frames themselves, but I have for many, many years put these in a format where the loop spans whatever tropical storm or hurricane is in view. So in this one, which starts yesterday, we can see Laura coming into the frame on the right side. and just scraping by the south coast of Cuba the whole time. So actually the core has essentially been over the ocean the whole time. It's with just a few quick exceptions. So this will be in view of the Cuba radar network for most of the rest of the day, and then out into the Gulf of Mexico beyond that.
Okay. And you can find Brian's loops of any landfalling storm where radars are available on his website, Tropical Atlantic Headquarters. You Google it, you find it's got a lot of great information there. Recon has been flying, Laura, and as you notice, they fly over Cuba. We have, for many years now, had a working agreement with the government of Cuba for meteorological missions. It's in their best interest to have the best data also. So instead of having to go all the way around Cuba, like when I was flying them, now we can go direct from the Florida down into the storm itself when it's south of Cuba. And the recon is finding basically what is in the current and previous advisory of a fairly well-defined tropical cyclone now with flight level winds in the 50 to 60 knot range. This was from last night's run, and go back a notch here. And it's a 400 to 700 millibar relative humidity and mean winds, an average in there. And it kind of points out the steering current to some extent, as well as the presence of dry air. And notice all the dry air over the Gulf of Mexico when the storm comes off Cuba. But the model itself doesn't look like it's entraining much of that at all. It's staying moist. So if that comes to pass, the significant intensification that's expected seems quite realistic to me. And the key will be how this system turns when it gets up here in the northern Gulf. So many storms do that. The 1900 storm, the Rita, Ike, all of them had an issue with where they're going to turn as far as where landfall would be. The 12Z model run is just starting to come in, so I haven't really digested it. I'll just point you, this was a good chance to show the strong subtropical high that's driving the storm west-northwest. The trough feature over Texas, and between the two, it's setting up this channel of first west to east to west, then northwest, then north steering current into the United States. And as time marches on, you see the ridge builds into the west. A little different orientation than we were looking at last night, but the end result is basically the same, it looks like. I won't get too carried away with whether this is the best answer or not, because I haven't had a chance to look at the model or any others for that matter. But it gives the north turn and in very close to where the official forecast is of probably at least approaching a major hurricane strength, Laura, as it crosses the coast Wednesday night or early Thursday morning. Let's try something else here. Okay, now, if I do this right, we'll go into what's being put out and some of the whys on there. It's a 10 a.m. advisory on Marco. That's all I'm going to really show on it, because it's going to make landfall sometime later today. The tropical storm warnings have been reduced to east of Vermilion Bay to west of Mobile. Just a small area, tropical storm force winds. Being Louisiana and the low country that it is, and the geometry of storm surge creation there, they will have a storm surge threat. And hence, there is a warning out on that, and for 2 to 4 feet possible in that area from Ocean Springs to Morgan City. Mainly a road issue, I think. Most of the houses that are down that low are up on stilts. Turning to Laura, the advisory that just came out is very similar to last night's with the landfall in the southwest Louisiana coast. The forecast values at the points bring it to 90 knots just before landfall, but in their discussion, they mentioned that some of the models go higher, and I'll show you that, and that given the really prime conditions as it crosses the southeast and central Gulf, the chance for rapid intensification that might get it into a higher category is still present. Arrival times and in general, the conditions will start going downhill tomorrow. I think the tides will start coming up early if the storm really develops hard, and then we'll start getting wave action, beach erosion, and the first outer rain bands during the evening hours or during the daytime hours on Wednesday prior to landfall. And a whole section of the coast there will have some tidal elevations. Still too early for a storm surge forecast and warning issuance on that, I think, though they may actually try by later this afternoon to get one out on it. Rainfall forecast, to me, this looks reasonable. It coincides with the current track forecast and speed that a relatively low 5 to 10 inch for a hurricane in the south, the Gulf Coast area, 5 to 10 inches is fairly low, but it's moving fast, and that's the key factor as to why we're not getting a big rain forecast. Okay, what are some of the problems with our forecasting on this? All along the ensemble models of the European GFS and UK Met have had a tendency to show a lot of spread in the possibilities, and that the ones on the west side of the track, south and west of the track, tend to make stronger hurricanes than the ones east of the mean track on there. And in this 0-6Z example, all the mean and ensemble means were all west of the official forecast area in there. So to me, that means there's still some uncertainty as to when the thing might actually turn, and especially if it does a rapid intensification and changes the environment around.
Bill,
yes.
can I point something out on there that I think is kind of interesting with this? Overall, if you squint your eyes a little bit to kind of blur out the fine details, the tracks that stay further west tend to be a little more strong than the ones that come further east.
Yeah.
That can certainly be an important thing to consider as we watch how Laura moves across the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, and they were the European especially was even more so yesterday afternoon. They had a high number of members that were major hurricanes west of the mean. Okay, just a couple of eye candy landfalls for you. The GFS from 06Z was about 85 knots, 954 millibars on the southwest Louisiana coast. The 6Z European had 112 knots just southwest of Galveston, which near and dear to my heart. And then the UK Met brings it in even further south on the that was the 0Z run of theirs. We only get the 0 and 12Z output from them. And everybody's running these, showing these Germany icon. I don't have any knowledge on their validity, how good they are, but it just because it's out there, here's what it was forecasting somewhere in between Galveston Bay and the Sabine River for a landfall. So there's a lot of options here for where this storm might go. And then, of course, for the intensity issue, both hurricane models were cranking up a major hurricane at landfall, and they flip-flop with each other sometimes on where it'll actually go on these runs. But either one of those cases would be a catastrophic storm surge event should it occur. For those that aren't familiar with the area, this is the Category 3 what's called maximum of the maximum. It's the worst case scenario for a Category 3 at any of those locations. And in general, what it's telling you is there's a huge storm surge problem in this portion of the Gulf Coast, mainly since humans have decided to develop in it. A Cat 4, it just gets a little deeper and a little farther inland. Zoom in on the Houston area. This picture here, the areas that are shown inundated by storm surge flooding represent roughly the homes of 1 million people now. Where you see the word Seabrook there, the NASA Johnson Space Center is back in here. It'd be under 9 feet of water in a Category 4 hurricane. My house is right over here. It's one of the few dry spots in Galveston County. All along here are petrochem complexes, and this is a Houston ship channel where about half of all our military grade fuel and a lot of our aviation fuel is refined. And Cat 4 starts to flood those facilities, which would take weeks, if not months, to get back in shape should they get a major surge. So to sum things up, there's still uncertainty in both the track and intensity around landfall. That should become clearer certainly by tomorrow as we get closer to that point, and there's less margin for error in the models, hopefully. Environmental factors support rapid intensification, low shear, apparently plenty of moisture, and a very warm ocean are the three big factors you look at there. Because of the geography of where the forecast landfall is, it's a big storm surge threat. It'll cover any of those tracks would cover most of Louisiana with some storm surge. And the further east, obviously, the more water gets trapped all the way east to near New Orleans. The fairly rapid movement will keep the rainfall in a manageable level, still could cause some flooding. And I think the major population centers, the Golden Triangle of Texas, the Houston, Galveston area, maybe Lake Charles, at least have to consider what their evacuation decisions are, because they're not going to have a lot of time if they wait till tomorrow. That's what I had to talk about here. I'll get the slideshow back to you guys, and once I figure out how. Okay. So, Brian, what do you think?
Well, I guess we can start with what's happening right now and how what was last night, Hurricane Marco, has quickly succumbed to the very high shear. That is quite good luck considering what's coming. There were certainly times this weekend where the fear was you're going to have two landfalling hurricanes in 2 days, which it's hard to imagine that. So it's working out for the best that Marco is getting ripped apart right now and will not really be an event so much. I mean, there'll be a little bit of rain and very little storm surge, as you mentioned. So at least we have, I guess, that going into where we don't have two big rain events and two big storm surges back to back. So looking ahead then, as Marco kind of drifts westward out of the picture, everyone can kind of focus just on one thing. And of course, that's going to be how strong what is now Tropical Storm Laura will be, and it's fully expected to be a hurricane. So yeah, it's, I think kind of what you mentioned is one of my concerns with it is I don't see a lot going against it to stop what we would call the rapid intensification over the next 1 to 2 days. So I think that's the big concern moving forward is just how strong can this get in the next 2.5 days before it reaches the coast.
Okay. That I think Tim, you got any questions for us coming in?
Yeah. The first one is, is Marco strong enough to stir up any colder water to give Laura a less favorable environment? Is there any upwelling behind Marco that would maybe inhibit Laura a little bit?
Well, that's a good question. I have not looked at the sea temperature, and I'm not sure we'd have the most current one available yet. Do you have any?
My hunch is no, for two reasons. One, actually three. I would say between the small size of Marco, the relatively low intensity, it's not an extremely strong storm, and it's moving pretty quickly too. So those things combined, I don't think you're going to really upwell much. And then I guess as a fourth ingredient in there is the warm water in the Gulf is pretty deep too. So it would take a lot to upwell cool water, and it's just the things that could do it just aren't there.
If these were the other way around and Laura was first,
Exactly.
that would be a different story. But Marco not significant enough to do much. Sonny's asking the question, what happens when a tropical storm encounters a dry area, band 10 vapor maps? If the lower level is still over a very warm Gulf, does a dry upper air have an effect on the storm? Anybody can answer that. That wants to.
Far away, Brian.
Sure. I mean, any dry air anywhere near a hurricane or tropical storm is not good for it. It's good for us on land who, we don't want it to strengthen, but if you put yourself in the place of a hurricane, you don't want that dry air anywhere close to you. It's probably not as much of a problem if it's in the kind of in the high levels of the atmosphere as it would be where it's actually ingesting in the low to mid levels. But I think Bill pointed this out during his part and kind of showing that as Laura moves across the Gulf, there is some dry air to the west of it, but